We're in the middle of a long election season in Mississippi. Last week's party primaries were only the first step for candidates seeking office. Some are facing runoffs in 2 weeks. One of the most highly anticipated races is the governor's race. In that race, even the general election may not be the deciding vote. Our Quentin Smith joins us live in the studio. Quentin, a candidate needs more than just the popular vote to win that seat.
That's right, Scott. Mississippi has its own version of the Electoral College. If a candidate wins the popular vote but doesn't win a majority of the House district vote, the House Senate itself will then choose a governor. Now, this rule has been in effect since 1890. Now a lawsuit has been filed challenging this rule in an effort to keep the state from using it during this year's election. Being the governor of Mississippi, it's the title these three men are vying for. But to win that seat, the Magnolia State has its own set of guidelines.
To win the governor's race in Mississippi, according to the 1890s Constitution, you have to get the majority of the popular vote as well as the majority of the electoral districts, which correspond to the House of Representatives seats in the state.
The state of Mississippi has been operating under this Constitution for more than 100 years.
The 1890 Constitution is going, or did, solidify Jim Crow traditions and other statutes and made them permanently part of the Mississippi Constitution.
History instructor Chuck Yarbrough says the Constitution was put in place due to the racial makeup of the state.
During that time period, there were a lot of constitutional provisions in the 1890 Constitution which were clearly intended to limit African American voter participation. Prior to the 1890 Constitution, about 80% of eligible African American voters in Mississippi were registered to vote. After the 1890 Constitution's restrictions, that percentage dropped below 10%, and it stayed below 10% until after the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Yarbrough says, theoretically, the Constitution would only play a big role if the governor's race is close. However, he does admit the Constitution leaves a lot of power in the hands of the legislators.
It's a little bit unusual that it doesn't correspond to the popular vote solely. In the case that there was a tie in the electoral districts, it goes to the legislature to determine the winner. But theoretically, the legislature could tip the scale to whomever they chose at that point.
Now, this rule actually came into play back in 1999. Democratic candidate Ronnie Musgrove received 49% of the popular vote, while Republican candidate Michael Parker received 48% of the vote. Both candidates evenly split the House districts, and as a result, the legislators gave the nod to Musgrove since he had more statewide votes than his opponent. Scott?